Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Economic and Social Youth Forum at the United Nations. My name is Bowen Tang, and I am the president of the International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this side event hosted by ECOSOC. To be part of the discussion about youth taking action for a sustainable future as we look at recovering from COVID-19. The theme for today's event is to talk about the power of community and peer support in navigating access and inclusion. Rather than this be a 1.5 hour lecture event, I want to make it clear that this is an open invitation for all of us here today on this call to be able to have a conversation around why it is important for us to have a community that is created by young people and how it contributes to the inspiration and the sharing of information and ideas for us to be able to take action in whatever it is that we set our mind to. So I will first start off by sharing a little bit about what the International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People is. And a lot of the panelists that we have today will be talking about the work in the hard of hearing community. But that does not mean anything that we do cannot be applied to any other communities or different sectors that you may possibly be in. As an icebreaker, I would like to invite you all to use the chat box to say where you're from and what part of the community you're with. If you're also within the hard of hearing community, or if you're joining us from a different sector and what brings you here today to this side event. So please take a moment to use the chat box to introduce yourself, and then I will move on to talking about ECOSOC. And welcome Claire and welcome Errol. Yeah. Okay. So here is what our organization is about. So the International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People is an international non-governmental federation for national and regional youth organizations that is dedicated to hard of hearing young people from the age of 18 to 35 throughout the world. Our primary aim is to enhance the quality of life for hard of hearing youth worldwide by advocating and promoting equal rights in all levels of society, such as the right to education, employment, health, and freedom of choice, with necessary accommodations to meet their accessibility needs for full inclusion. We strive for empowerment of hard of hearing young people, for the visibility and representation of youth with disabilities at European and international levels. So one highlight to mention is our organization is unique in being the only international federation of youth people. And what that means is we are the independent organization that is composed of young people from 18 to 35. And we were created in 1968, back when there was a group of young people in Europe, in Italy, I would say. And they thought it would be great to get together and to connect. And then eventually it grew into something more. And this is where we are 54 years later. So today we have a scope of 21 member countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. And we're currently also expanding to South America as well. And you can see that our reach is quite wide in the sense that we're able to bring together hard of hearing young people from all over the world with the purpose of making sure that we all feel that we are part of this journey together as we navigate our lives with hearing loss, and to talk about the successes and challenges that we have in advocating for the accessibility and inclusion as we navigate our day-to-day lives. So I would like to just quickly share two main examples of how we bring young people together and how that eventually translate into inspiration for young people to go back to the communities, to take action, to advocate for their rights and access. So first and foremost is our study sessions, which we often do with in partnership with the Council of Europe. So this picture was taken at the 2019 study session in Strasbourg, where 35 young people gathered together to spend a week together to talk about leadership, what it means to be a leader, and what the skills are needed in order for them to become confident, not just in their own identities as a hard of hearing person, but also the confidence to speak up for themselves on what the gaps they notice in their communities. So at the center of this picture is Helga, who is the member of European Parliament. She is also a deaf person herself. And so that was an inspiration for sure for all the participants to be able to witness a role model, to be able to participate in politics and be able to have a voice representing deaf and hard of hearing people in Europe. So a lot of the ideas came about from this study session as people come together to talk about different projects and ideas that they would like to do. And that resulted in two different products from our previous study sessions. So the first one was the No Hate Speech campaign in 2014, where we produced a series of videos that highlight changing the misperception about hard of hearing people, that we can understand others if we're able to have access. It's not that we're not able to hear you, it's that we're not able to understand you completely if we don't have access. And then we also have the Eye for Hip Talks, which is a variation of TED Talks, and each individual is invited to share their lived experiences of the challenges with hearing loss. So that's what the study sessions do, is that it really promotes you to take action after spending a week together to learn about the skills, and more importantly, the human rights education and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Of course, we also like to have fun as young people, which is in our nature, to have summer camps every 2 years. So we had our recent summer camp in the Netherlands, where again, the idea is to come together as a community where some of these participants have never met another person with a hearing loss. And so that impact was so profound for them to be able to know that they're not the only ones struggling with the barriers of having a hearing loss. And it is life-changing where they could feel comfortable and at ease and knowing that everything will be just fine just by talking to another person who can relate to everything that they're going through with having a hearing loss. And from that point, the person will build the confidence and also becoming an activist to go back and say, I have a hearing loss and I'm proud to have that, and I can do whatever I want to be. So that's the snapshot of our organization. And again, it really emphasizes building communities so that young people, young hard of hearing people can thrive. So today, the objectives of this session is to talk about how the pandemic has affected us in being able to come together when we had to do physical distancing and we were not able to have large group events. So therefore, it's natural for us to start feeling isolation and withdraw from the community when we no longer could have the same access as before when we were thrown into the virtual world. So it was a process of relearning and resetting ourselves in terms of advocating for different needs in a new environment. But that didn't take long for us to look at, well, we need to take action and do something about it so that we can stay connected. So we'll share some examples of how the power of building communities is able to help us be able to continue to provide peer support and overcome the obstacles and share resources to promote access. And we'll highlight the examples of capacity building work and the youth in action from various regions. So here are our guiding questions for today, which I invite you all to think about. And why do we need a community of young people? And how do we create a community? And what is a community? So clearly, the central theme here is community. And I personally believe that it's only through having a community can we take the next step for youth to be able to take concrete actions within the community or expand it outside of the community to push for progress that we want to make from the perspective of access and inclusion for people with disabilities and as well as any other communities that we want to be a part of. So since the pandemic started, a group of young people felt that, well, we needed to look at the impact of the COVID-19 on hard of hearing people. So we collaborated with other hard of hearing organizations such as International Federation of Hard of Hearing People and the European Federation of Hard of Hearing and the Asia Pacific Federation of Hard of Hearing. And we wanted to look at what are the challenges faced by hard of hearing people in the earlier days of COVID-19. And then we developed a survey to look at what we need to support in terms of information and resources. So from the survey and the report, we came up with 10 recommendations, some of which are highlighted here. So for example, we noticed that clear and transparent face masks were not provided in the medical setting or any public services. So we needed that to happen in order for us to access those essential services during the pandemic. And there needs to be more flexibility about alternate communication options rather than just a complete reliance on a telephone. And open and closed captioning needs to be made regularly available on all media platforms that broadcast public information. And even though we have the benefit of automatic captioning to support us, it does not substitute the provision of captioners or speech-to-text interpreters. So we wanted to emphasize that as well, because sometimes when we see a trend, it could be end up in a negative impact in the long term. And overall, like there just needs to be more education to be provided to hard of hearing person and any other people about automatic captioning apps in the event that the professional captioners is not available. So this is an example of how quickly we were able to mobilize ourselves to look at the reality and what are the steps that needs to be taken and how we go about putting forth those recommendations. So it was a great partnership with all of the organizations from different regions to put together this document and to spread it widely. And it has made some impact in certain regions. And of course, we did not let ourselves stop being connected, where we just jump into offering virtual meetups in order to stay connected and to talk about what are the current changes that are happening and how we're navigating the new challenges. And lastly, for capacity building, our team of young people were able to develop a global inventory of clear and transparent face masks to have a one-stop shop for people to go to get the face masks that they need. And in partnership with the World Federation of the Deaf, we created a statement on accessible communication for deaf and hard of hearing people, and to offer a list of technological communication tools in the virtual world, such as this platform, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, and so on. And lastly, we look at the survey on the quality of subtitling, which we rely so much on during the virtual world. So in our organization in the last 2 years during COVID-19, there's always a group of young people who took the initiative to take action, and these are the results of their work. But now, looking ahead as we recover from COVID-19, as we look at going back into in-person and looking at other ways to continue taking action, because there's always so much to be done, we need to look at what more is needed for us to be able to move forward, because right now there are definitely still challenges in terms of other parts of the world being able to participate in this action because of funding, because of a variety of other reasons. So that's what today is about, is how can we ensure that there is a foundation of community for young people so that we can take action moving forward. So at this point, I would like to introduce our panelists, okay? And I will spotlight them as we go through each of them. So we have Sawada Moses from Uganda, who is the president of the Africa Federation of Hard of Hearing. And we have Jessica Nimila from Canada, who is a community organizer in the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association. And we have Sergio Rodriguez from Bolivia, who is an activist in the Latin hard of hearing community to create a space for them to connect. We have Nita Bhattari from Nepal, who is the president of the Shruti, which is the Nepalese hard of hearing organization. And finally, we have Lydia Best from the UK, who is the president of the European Federation of Hard of Hearing. So each of them will have the opportunity to introduce themselves, and then I will have specific questions for them to share some examples of their work to form communities, whether it is barriers or challenges, and what they feel is the value of having young people to be part of those communities, and what young people need to have in order to take action. Okay. So I will stop sharing my screen now. And I will first like to invite Moses to the floor and to introduce himself. So Moses, please let us know if you're here by turning off your video.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Moses. So the floor is yours. If you could introduce yourself and what you're doing in Africa.
Thank you so much. Moses Serada from Uganda. I'm a member of the Uganda Federation of the Hard of Hearing, working as the programs manager. In Africa, generally, I'm serving as the acting president of the African Federation of the Hard of Hearing. We do empower and connect young and adult hard of hearing people. That is one of our targets as far as the African Federation is concerned. We want to amplify voices for hard of hearing people across the continent because there is no unifying voice for hard of hearing persons in Africa. Yet the practice is clear in other continents. There exist unifying continental bodies for persons who are hard of hearing. And we are here because we want to join their mix and be part of the no leaving anyone behind agenda. So our African Federation of the Hard of Hearing is here and seeking to work closely with other sister organizations working for the benefit of hard of hearing persons worldwide.
Thank you, Moses, for that introduction about your organization. Could you tell us just a little bit about what the main barriers you have seen when you try to connect young people with disabilities in Africa?
To begin with, technological barriers. In Africa, there is lack of skill in the technology know-how. This happens when persons with disabilities don't know how to use technology. Many youth with disabilities or persons with disabilities are struggling to use technology and are not in position to adapt in any way. Despite the available technological developments, many still lack the capacity to use technology. And some lack adequate information how to use communication gadgets. And they are unable to even navigate websites which have crucial information. And now strategically to use technology to leverage opportunities around them. because with technology, it comes with the benefit of many. It comes with the benefit of many things. For example, you can be able to network, you can be able to source for information, you can be able to connect with people, but without this information, you find that some people are cut off opportunities and they just pass there and then. So the technological barrier is key. And the other one I can talk about is information and communication barrier. This one happens when like people with sensory disabilities, like hard of hearing people, even those ones who are blind, and those ones who have learning disabilities, when they cannot use maybe communication platforms to get or to receive the information or to participate fully in some activities. For example, you find that some applications, they invite hard of hearing persons to participate, but when they have not provided captions. So this one somehow blocks the information and also somehow indirectly breaks the information access to persons who are hard of hearing. There's also another aspect of differences in the language. We have the Anglophone and the Francophone countries in Africa. The Anglophone are the English-speaking countries, and the Francophone are the French-speaking countries. So you find that sometimes it is a little bit hard to easily connect between hard of hearing people in the Anglophone countries and those ones in the Francophone countries. It also works hand in hand with the differences in time. Somehow you schedule meetings to inform people about some special information, but it ends up that people have not clearly understood the time, and the time differences is also another thing. Then the other barrier I can talk about is poverty. Poverty is making it hard for persons with disabilities to own communication gadgets or even afford internet connectivity charges, because in Africa, mostly we have to subscribe for data daily. You can subscribe weekly, you can subscribe daily, but most people in Africa are poor, and so some may be having the smartphones, but they lack the data. And so they are cut off opportunities because they cannot afford daily internet. And then the last one I'm going to talk about here is the low bandwidth. In most African countries, it affects internet reliability. And besides, many Africans with disabilities live in hard-to-reach places. All those ones that are very remote, where internet accessibility is a challenge. And so they find themselves being cut off crucial information that would be important for them and their connectivity in the communities. Yeah.
Wow. There's no doubt that the internet connectivity and other technological requirement is a key to be able to be part of a community, and that is a major barrier for the region in Africa. But I know that despite all of that, you were able to find a way to bring together members of hard of hearing people from at least, I would say, 10 countries across Africa. And you managed to use different platforms that don't require as much bandwidth, such as WhatsApp. And you're able to have engaging conversation with other young people across the continent. So you're able, while the current situation where technology is simply solved, but you didn't let that stop you from taking action in forming the Africa Federation of Hard of Hearing. So that's really inspirational and fantastic that there's always a solution to the barriers that are being put in front of us. So my last question to you is, now that the Africa Federation of Hard of Hearing is created, what are some actions that you're hoping to see in the coming year for the hard of hearing young people?
Okay, about the actions, we are thinking of having in place a strategic plan that will guide our actions. And two, we plan to generate and consolidate a database for young hard of hearing persons in their countries. We also hope to build and strengthen the networking amongst hard of hearing persons, so that they don't feel isolated, but they feel a sense of connectivity. We also think of building capacities of hard of hearing persons in virtual skills and self-awareness to fight the stigma and be in position to self-advocate. Some of the virtual challenges that are encountered are just very manageable. But because some people feel that it is hard, they don't even give it a try. But we want to show them that it is manageable. So using virtual skill, using communication gadgets like using Google Meet is something very easy. Using other connectivity applications that are suitable for hard of hearing persons are very easy. And so we want to show them how they can make use of these ones. To my observation, many of the African hard of hearing fraternity are not aware about these communication gadgets and how they can maximize them to communicate. And we're also going to empower young hard of hearing persons in human rights, particularly the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. This is something that is behind the formation of the African Federation of the Hard of Hearing. We want to empower everyone with the human rights perspective. And this is the only tool that we are going to use to advocate in our countries, nationally, regionally, and also internationally. So we hope that if we empower everyone with knowledge about human rights, we shall have an empowered fraternity, and we shall be able to move as a group. And we also hope to amplify awareness raising about our unique identity as hard of hearing persons in regard to communication and accessibility. In COVID-19, it was made clear to us that in some governments, they don't really understand that persons who are hard of hearing are there, and they also have different accessibility needs. The use of sign language overshadowed the need for captions. And therefore, we need to raise awareness about the communication accessibility needs of hard of young persons. And lastly, we hope to explore options for resource mobilization so that we can have in-person sessions. It will bring more meaning to the hard of young persons if we come together, for example, in Africa, and we discuss issues of common importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moses. That couldn't be said better with how you describe about empowerment of young people. And you really highlighted the point of why we need a community, because there are so many young people spread across Africa. It's with such a potential to make it different, and all they need is to have a platform to come together and to ignite those passion inside them by giving them the skills that they can have and the knowledge that they need to maximize the potential that they have to make a very impactful changes in their communities. So thank you, Moses, for sharing your thoughts about what is happening in Africa. And I know that on behalf of I4HIP, we are committed to working with you and the Africa Federation of Hard of Hearing to continue this great work. So thank you, Moses. And now we will move on to a different continent where we will go to North America and we'll hear from Jessica Nemila, who is from Canada. And she will introduce herself about who she is and what she does. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you for joining us. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bowen. Thank you for having me. My name is Jessica, and I live in Vernon, British Columbia, Canada. I work as a pediatric audiologist, and I am the secretary and event coordinator of the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, BC chapter. I have a moderately severe hearing loss, and I wear hearing aids. And I am the creator of a very special science exhibit titled The Way We Hear It, a community engagement exhibition that is coming to my community in May. And I look forward to talking to you more about this.
And that is such a wonderful event that I look forward to seeing as well, since we actually live close to each other, and I'll be at that community event as well. So here you can see is the poster of the community exhibit that Jessica mentioned. So Jessica, could you tell us how you were inspired to organize this community event? Like, what do you see is the value of organizing it, and what was the work that you have undertaken to put this together? And I know that a lot of the work is done by you, so which is fantastic. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so like and you mentioned, I'm involved in the creation of the science exhibit that I will refer to as The Way We Hear It, which received funding and support by the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association. Just a little background, it's an interactive educational display that is geared towards the general public of all ages and aims to increase awareness around our hearing system, hearing health, hearing loss, accessibility, and our deaf and hard of hearing community. Actually it is happening in the month of May because in Canada, May is actually speech and hearing month. So it's the perfect time to celebrate the month and all the work that professionals, hearing loss communities, and organizations do. At the same time, we are also educating the public and showing them why hearing health is important. So that's a little background, but the birth of the project, though, involved unsurprisingly a number of factors. I often frequent our local science center here with my young child, and I noticed that the center, like other science centers, has these special exhibits that come and go. So I thought it would be really cool if a nonprofit organization such as CHA BC could put on a display that would promote education and awareness around hearing loss. You know, all the good stuff that we like to talk about, but then displaying this valuable information for the general public and not just our community of people with hearing loss. I feel that people in general have a lack of understanding around hearing health, and they certainly don't know that great organizations exist, such as CHA, who can provide a sense of community and support for those with hearing loss. So this really sparked my interest. And next thing you know, I approached the executive director of the Okanagan Science Center with my idea to host an exhibit about hearing loss under CHA's name, and she approved. So yeah, the exhibit is going to be set up as a variety of standalone individual interactive education stations. And each station was actually made possible by collaboration with professionals in the field, people with hearing loss, and other organizations and partners. The vision of the exhibit kind of takes on like an intersectoral action approach by showing the public that there are many different community partners that are involved in caring for our hearing. So for example, our hearing screening station is being provided by our local health unit. We collaborated with WorkSafe BC and 3M to provide information on how to protect our hearing. We called on community partners with hearing loss to help with the art pieces of the exhibit and provide photos and quotes for our accessibility display. We consulted various organizations to help us edit our education panels and provide feedback so that the information is sound and accurate. And also, I'm excited because there are going to be a lot of opportunities for people to touch and feel hearing devices, which was made possible by collaborating with hearing device manufacturers. But I feel like kids touch glasses at a very young age, and the same thing doesn't necessarily happen with hearing aids. So, and I think this kind of contributes to the lack of understanding of hearing devices. So I guess I'm really excited to see children touch hearing aids. And then, yeah, so through this vision, we want to show people that hearing health actually requires a holistic approach. Hearing aids, for example, are not going to solve all our problems, as we know. And we actually need a team, a community, and a society that appreciates a sense of accessibility to get through a journey with hearing loss. And that will be shown through the various exhibit displays. And finally, also, I just want to say that as we're aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought hearing loss really to the forefront, as people, even with a mild degree of hearing loss, have experienced communication challenges with masks and restrictions in place. And I think now is the time to really start talking about these barriers and showing the public how we can live our lives without making society inaccessible for those with hearing loss. And also in our province in BC, the Accessible BC Canada, or BC Act, was passed in 2021 in our provincial government. And this is a big political move for our province to move forward on policies around inclusion and disabilities. And so as we become more accessible and inclusive as a province, I think now is the time to start educating the public on exactly what that means. So for CHA BC, this means educating the public on hearing health, hearing loss, and our deaf and hard of hearing community.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing that great overview. And that is just one of the many ways that we can bridge the community together, where, you know, by this exhibit that you're putting together, you're inviting the larger community to become part of our community, people with hearing loss, so that they can get that firsthand perspective of what it's like to have hearing loss. So that's a fantastic way of being able to create a quick ripple effect of making sure that people understand what hearing loss is all about, and the work and the effort it takes to navigate that day to day. So as a young person yourself, it requires a lot of energy, right, to put together this exhibit. So could you tell us just a little bit about your experience in putting together this event for the community, what you have learned from it, in terms of like the support that you had, or what you feel that other young people should take away from just hearing from what you just shared on how they can bring their ideas into a reality, just like you have turned your idea into a reality. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think all of our projects that we're doing here takes a ton of work, right? And we all are just doing this because we're so passionate about it. We're doing this on a volunteer basis, you know, not really getting paid. So yeah, it's kind of a huge commitment sometimes to do something for our community. But first of all, I guess I would just like to say that if you're a person with hearing loss and you are, or even thinking about taking action in your community, this is a big, courageous step. And even if you make a difference only in one person's day or life, that's a huge accomplishment. And this kind of work that we do should not be taken lightly. It's extremely valuable, not only for others out there with hearing loss, but their significant others, their families, government, and the world. And also these kinds of projects, even if it seems like something very simple, like organizing a virtual chat, you should never take on anything alone or by yourself. You know, the way we hear it, this science exhibit was really something I took on many roles for, even though I did have a lot of community partners helping me with the materials and whatever they could. I guess I would just say, you know, always calibrate your expectations in this kind of work. Don't burn yourself out, and make sure that you reach out to others when you need it. And also, I think it's very important to make your work known outside of the hearing loss community as well. I find it very effective to let as many people know as possible who you are and what you're creating or organizing, because chances are, even if they don't have hearing loss, someone in their family probably does, you know, and like Bowen was saying, it's kind of a ripple effect. Let's spread the good word, right? So for the way we hear it science exhibit, we actually asked all of our community partners to advertise the exhibit on their website and social media pages. And we have flyers up at our local libraries and recreation centers. We want everyone to know that it's happening. So I guess I'll conclude by saying to continue your work, reach out for help if you need it, and let everyone know what is happening in your community.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for joining us. And you really hit the nail where, you know, a lot of the times when we think that we're not really making a difference because it seems so small and insignificant, but we really are making such a difference just by taking that one small step to do something that we care so deeply about. So thank you again, Jessica. And I would now like to invite Anita from Nepal to join us as she shared what she has seen in her organization and how she has been supporting young people in Nepal to build capacity and have the confidence to carry on the legacy that has been created in Nepal. And the floor is yours.
Hello. Yeah, it's okay now. Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, in Nepal, we have a different constitution. In Nepal, Constitution of Nepal has provided different. Sorry. Constitution of Nepal has provided provision to develop various policy to encourage youth participation in various sectors for the development of the country, such as emphasizing the provision of opportunity for young people in field of education, health, empowerment to develop their capacity and empowerment. Next slide. Ministry of Youth Sports also mandate promoting supporting development of youth capacity in Nepal. National Youth Council, National Youth Policy also available in Nepal. National non-government organization and civil society organization plays a vital role in youth empowerment in Nepal. According to one of the UNDP survey in Nepal, almost 46,500 NGOs are affiliated with social welfare. Among them, 20% are youth organizations. Next slide, please. UN agencies have provided opportunity for youth development, such as UN volunteers, UN Youth Advisory Panel, and so on. UN also provided some opportunity to disability group too. But there is a main issue on hard of hearing for youth. However, lack of accessibility for hard of hearing youth opportunity could not reach the hard of hearing young people. Some cases are available who get opportunity, but it seems just like a participation only. It doesn't have a meaningful participation due to lack of accessibility. So hard of hearing young people, young youth are far behind in the reach of getting opportunities. Next slide, please. Despite all of these opportunities, Shruti is trying our best. With considering hard of hearing youth development, Shruti has been working on providing trainings with fully accessibility as per their needs, such as providing captioning, manual captioning, written in the board, using paper and pen, a face-to-face conversation, so on. Next slide, please. Some important activities. Shruti has been providing IT training to young youth, to which 70% of youth already have engaged in job and have got started their own business after getting the IT training. Shruti also have given skill development training to young youth, such as sewing, making accessories, and making crafts, so on. After the training, they empower themselves. We are just giving training as per their needs and what they want. Shruti also organized international volunteer exchange program with support of European Union, where we sent young youth to Europe, and from the Greece, Romania, and Spain, young youth came to Nepal for exchange program. And during the COVID pandemic, young youth were very much affected due to not being patronized by the government. They could not get any service due to lack of recognition as a disability. Considering the situation of hard-of-hearing young youth, Shruti has connected through the social media and developed a group messenger to share the experience and give a counseling through using social media, such as using Messenger, WhatsApp, and Viber. Nowadays, Shruti has several networks in various provinces of Nepal, where most are the youth leaders. Next slide, please. Why we need the community, in your question. Youth are a pioneer of development of the organization. Youth can raise the voice in advocacy for their rights, which will be sustainable in the future generation. Youth are involving actively in the organization, in our organization, such as organizing workshops, sensitization programs, organizing trainings, providing counseling, so on. Next slide, please. What we can do for the improvement. Due to lack of accessibility in education for hard of hearing, their quality of education is below level. So they need a full accessibility and needs extra support and training and development of hard of hearing quality of education. The information in the television are not accessible for hard of hearing youth in Nepal. There is no captioning available. Even in COVID period, hard of hearing youth faced psychological stress, faced the mental health issues, due to lack of information as per survey conducted by the Shruti. And end the note. Next slide, please. We feel without youth capacity development, there will not be sustainability in development of the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nita, for providing that really clear overview of the situation in Nepal, and you definitely answered the questions that I had in mind when it comes to the value of youth in an organization. And we thank you for putting such a great investment in your youth, in your organization. So the commonalities that we have heard so far is that youth are having challenges taking action when they are facing so many barriers just to acquire the knowledge that they need to be able to know what they can do. And that starts with being able to access information. So until these barriers are removed, there are no concrete ways for you to be able to take actions. So that's really something important to keep in mind. This is where we go back to the foundation of creating a community of young people, so that as a community, we can remove those barriers of being able to access information, to acquire the knowledge and skills. And then from that point, once the young people are able to grow by learning from each other, by learning from the people who have been in this work for so many years, such as yourself, Nita, Moses, Jessica, and as well as Lydia, who we will hear from next. It's really to talk about how can the knowledge be transferred from the people who have done the advocacy work for so many years, so that young people can continue the legacy, the work that has been done, and to make it even better than what it was before. So I always see this as passing the torch, right? As in an Olympics, where one generation passes the torch to the next generation to continue the advocacy work, and that's the only way we can create a sustainable future. So thank you again, Nita, for highlighting those key points. And now I would like to lastly invite Lydia from the UK to share with us about her organization, as well as the great partnership that IFOHIP and IFO will have to focus on youth participation. So please welcome Lydia.
Thank you, Bowen, for inviting me here today. Hello, everyone. While I am from the UK, I'm actually Polish, so my accent gives away too. And I have to say, from my own perspective, as well as the president of the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People, I have seen the power of that community, which actually I am the product of it. And many of my colleagues in the European sphere are the product of it. So just quickly to tell you, European Federation has 27 members within the geographical Europe, not just within the European Union. And one thing which I would like to say is we are missing the youth voice currently in our lobbying and advocacy work. But before I say that, I would like to come back to 1989, the year when I, for the first time, have actually met over hard of hearing people from different countries. I went to Denmark for the first summer camp, and financially it was very difficult, but luckily the organizers had secured sponsorship for the group of 5 Polish young people to attend. The amount of information I received there, and in some ways awakening, was enormous, and that in some ways had set a path to my life. Something Bowen has said at the beginning of his presentation. In Holland, recently, one of the last summer camps, there were some people who didn't even know what type of accessibility was available to them. Well, for me, it was lack of even knowledge that my hearing aid allows me to connect with a telecoil and I can hear directly in my ear. I've never been given that information by the age of 25, which you would say it's quite late awakening. And then this made me to start question things, start to look around, and it's exactly similar way of what I'm seeing from Nepal and Africa presentation and also Canada. Youth have this way of challenging existing order, challenging and question why those things are happening, why those things are not happening. But also as part of the community, it's so important because that young age, when we are teenagers till early 20s, it's the time when we developed ourselves as the persons. We are searching, we're looking for answers, and having the community which can give you the answers, which can support you and help you to develop your own identity is so important. And we want to continue similar kind of community build-up in the European Federation. But please don't forget one more thing. The International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People is a bedrock to all the movements in the youth advocacy. International Federation of Hard of Hearing People was actually built on the youth, and so was the European Federation. So one of the ways of what we're doing right now at the European Federation is to look at capacity building. We look at the youth and how they develop their own community. We have the gaps of hearing the youth voice, especially in the inclusive education, but also in employment. When we talk about someone who is 40-something, and we talk about someone who is able to enter the employment, the challenges are different. Young people need much more support, also even to break into the employment. Without the community feel, without the peer support and mentorship, it's much harder. It's also because when the hard of hearing people enter the employment, say in 1980s, the situation was different than the situation is now. And this is important to acknowledge it. But the knowledge I have and I can pass on may not be the same knowledge as the youth have, because we're coming from a different generation and different geopolitical and economical situation. In terms of the employment, is also, again, accessibility is so important. When I have been asked to travel to Poland and deliver training on mentorship and assertiveness, I didn't think at that time how important it was until I observed the same pupils I have taught few years later blossoming and actually taking the action and challenging the situation they find themselves in. And one of those things is also challenging how people see us, what kind of jobs we can do. The understanding of employment and further progress for people with disabilities, but especially for hard of hearing too, is many of the companies and also educators do not think that we can do the jobs we would like to do. Let's look just even in the medical field. Often, someone with hearing loss is completely discouraged to take up that field because we cannot hear very well somebody's heartbeat. But the technology exists and the educators themselves don't even know it exists. Youth, like I said before, challenge and has this energy to challenge the situation and take action. In this case, we need to challenge the policies, existing policies in many countries. Even in the European countries, the policies exist, which actually are discriminatory to the youth and everyone else. There is one thing we currently have started, and I already see some people taking advantage of that, which is the Digital Accessibility Rights Education Program, which comes from the American Association for Inclusive ICT Technologies. And the reason for that program is to grow the community, again, the word, the community of accessibility professionals. I am one of them, and I see a big gap when it comes to the people who are hard of hearing. I see mostly people who are blind, and in a way, naturally, because the ICT's digital accessibility is impacting much more the people who are blind. But at the same time, it impacts us when we cannot understand what we are receiving as the information, videos and online meetings and etc. So again, we are building the capacity not just for the European Federation, but for everyone, because the program is open to everyone. And one of them actually is here today, who has received the scholarship and will go on to become the accessibility specialist. This is important, but we get the right information and use it correctly. One of the things I've spoken previously, to be assertive, you have the knowledge behind you. You have to be sure that what you are asking or the solutions you propose are the right solutions. But that comes from knowledge. Your assertiveness you understand, you got, hold on a second, I'm not going to be pushed aside. I'm not going to be told that this cannot be done or this cannot happen, because I have a knowledge that actually it's happening in other countries. It is possible, the technology or solutions exist and they work. So for this reason, I find the community a powerful tool. And I still have a lot of friendships from the 1989 year when I first time went to the summer camp. And those are invaluable because the peer support, it's something you can't put price on. And the mentorship which we continue between the European Federation means that we pass on the knowledge, we pass the information on how we develop the lobbying and accessibility advocacy. One thing I just wanted to say is, it's also lately, last year, I have provided a training to the youth during the study session. And it's been a massive pleasure to share that information, because there is something else. Information in my head or anybody else, it's not good if it's not being passed on. So just like Bowen has said, it's like a passing on torch. We need the young people who are our future to gain all the tools and to see for themselves what is the most valuable information they get from us and how we take this forward. And take this from me. 20 years after I actually organized first summer camp in Poland, we have come back and we spearheaded in a way and pushed ahead again development of the new organizations for hard of hearing young people and also for adults. So yes, community is important. An international federation of hard of hearing people. Take my bow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for the encouraging words and advice on how we could captivate the value of being able to get the knowledge from you and many others who have been in this work for so many years. And I know from my own personal experience that somehow there has been a disconnect between like the adult population, as we call it, and the youth and the young people, where there's a misperception about how an organization or community created by young people are only focused on social networking, and that's all it is, right? That the perception around young people is they just want to socialize and that they're not necessarily interested in the advocacy work. But of course, that's not true. And so my question to you as we wrap this up is, how would you encourage young people to take that step to have a conversation with their mentors in their community so that they could create this connection and not be deterred by shyness or by any misconceptions? So how could that conversation start in order for the mentorship to happen?
It's quite a few prongs in different approach might be needed to the different groups. But for example, at the university, Catholic University in Poland, where I visited and developed the training, I used a safe space, which is in similar way as you are using in your study session, to get hard of hearing young people to actually speak up. And as part of my assertiveness training, I request them to write all the good things about themselves, but also the bad ones. Because as we know, even in employment, the potential employer will ask you, what are your bad things? So it's about self-awareness as well, and knowing what you can do. But what the biggest step for them was to actually read out all of the good things they think about themselves. Because young people, most of the time, not always, but also it doesn't matter what age you are, really. When you have a disability, you bring yourself down a bit, thinking, that you cannot do a lot of things. And that was kind of eye-opening for the students to actually see themselves suddenly in a completely different light. But how we can want to touch on that disconnect you mentioned, and it's true. I am one of the examples too of the disconnect, because when I moved away from Poland and I settled in the UK, I concentrated mostly on just, having a young family and just kind of setting my roots in a new country. So starting from scratch, basically. But I still stayed in contact with the youth organization in the UK as well. And I think that is part of it. Part when, young people just move on to create their own families. And then when maybe they are older, they move them, they start looking into the advocacy again. But it doesn't have to happen that way. And this is why European Federation has applied for a project which will bring the opportunity of having staff, opportunity to have internships, because what we need is we need to develop the young people knowledge, experience in the advocacy field. Participation matter. How many times we hear that? And yet we need to make sure that whoever goes out, meets with the policymakers, is the person who is themselves hard of hearing. They know without even thinking where to pick up the holes in the policy immediately, without thinking twice. And I see and observe this even now in the adult organization, where I meet with different organizations, where someone without hearing loss is taking part in stakeholder meetings. They will not sometimes say something, when to us, we say it immediately. But there is a problem here. And that is so important. The youth, they will continue and they can continue advocacy, either as someone who is actually working in the policy development and policy groups, or even as the youth volunteers. We have already got few volunteering with us, and we are hoping for more, because through volunteering, you are so much more, you learn so much more skill, the soft skills, which are so important for your future development. And why we also need that kind of awareness and continuity, because even now, I still have to advocate for myself in my own employment. So that advocating for yourself, it never stops. It continues throughout our lifetime. That's why it's so important that we do not have the gap, but we continue. Thank you.
Definitely, it is a lifelong journey for us to not just advocate for ourselves, but also advocating for others. So what you have done, starting in 1989 all the way today, it's clearly paved the pathway for us to be able to walk. And then in turn, we have to pave the path for the next generation as well. And I would say that I think the most important thing that all of us young people can do is never refrain from asking questions, because asking questions is the way to start a conversation if we are unsure of how to advocate, right? Because we always have to start somewhere, and it never hurts by asking a simple question to other people who can mentor you by providing you suggestions on how you can advocate for yourself and anything else that you need in order to succeed in life. Because we are made to succeed in life, we're not made to struggle in our life, and all we need to do is to be part of a community that could help us be the best we can and to maximize our potential. So thank you again, Lydia, for imparting these wisdom. So I would like to take a moment to invite all of our panelists to turn on the cameras, and then I would like to open up the floor in the remaining time that we have. If you have any more questions or comments that you would like to address to the panelists. So I'll take a moment to wait for you to type something in the chat box, and then I will wrap up with the final thought. So Nita and Moses, if you're still here, please turn on your camera and I will spotlight you as well. Again, any questions from the floor? Okay. Well, it seems like there has been a lot of information shared that we all need to take the time to process. So I really hope that you found this webinar informative and inspirational. And once again, please join me in giving a virtual applause to all of the panelists who have taken the time to share their perspective. And each of their perspectives are very diverse as well from the region that they're in. And we all have something to take away from what they have shared when it comes to how young people can take action when there is a sense of community being built in the regions. So I would like to close with the final thoughts for all of us to think about as we leave today's webinar. So this is taken from a book that I have read called The Community, the Structure of Belonging. So to belong to a community is to act as a creator, an investor, and a co-owner of that community. So as we think about the communities that we are currently a part of or want to be a part of, how are we contributing to that community? Are we creating something in it? Are we investing our time and energy into the community? And most of all, how are we owning that community? Because we cannot just be a receiver of that community. We have to be the owners of that community so that we can truly feel being part of who we are and be able to have authenticity in what we do. It is our role as leaders, and all of us here on this call are leaders in a variety of ways, to foster among all of the community's citizens a sense of ownership and accountability. So how do we also inspire other people in our community to own their part of being in the community and be accountable to what they do in and outside of that community? So here's the final question to all of you. I hope you will continue to think about from time to time. What do we want to create together as a community? And think about that in the context of as we look ahead and going back to a new normal when we no longer have the restrictions and moving away from the virtual community to bring back the in-person connections. Now, not to say the virtual communities will be completely eliminated, but now we're looking at the balance of having two formats of communities, one virtual and one in person. And what would that look like? What do you want to create in both of those communities? And how will that lead to the one thing that we all want the most, is for young people to be able to take action when they no longer have the barriers to access, and they are able to acquire the knowledge and skills so that they can move forward to create a sustainable future. So that is the question I leave with you all today. So thank you again for joining us on this webinar. This will be recorded and this will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. If you would like to know more about our organization and your work, as well as getting in touch with the panelists, you can email us at this email address, which I will type in the chat box. And I'll also bring back the screen to show you that slide as well. So you can connect us by email, website, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Yeah. And once again, I would like to acknowledge our captioners, Leah, for providing accessibility in this call. And thank you to Lydia, Lita, Jessica, and Moses for being on this call with us. So thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.